The messenger arrived at midnight, covered in blood, barely standing. He had ridden 3 days without stopping, through ice, through darkness, through the kind of cold that kills horses before it kills men. He collapsed at the gate, and before he lost consciousness, he said 4 words.
The ridge.
The ridge.
They're all dead.
They're all dead. Osric was dressed and moving before the torches were lit. He didn't wait for his officers, didn't wait for a full report, didn't wait for the sun. He rode north in the dark with 20 men behind him, because that was who he was. When something broke, he moved toward it. He had always moved toward it. 30 years of moving toward the hard thing. 30 years of arriving and fixing and deciding and continuing. That was the foundation everything else was built on. He reached the ridge at dawn and stopped. 19 survivors, sitting in the snow, some wounded, some staring at nothing, some shaking in ways that had nothing to do with the cold. The dead were still there, 11 of them, spread across the ridge exactly where the ambush had caught them. Osric dismounted, walked among them slowly, the way a commander walks through the cost of his own decisions. Counting, memorizing, accepting. He stopped at each one, looked at each face, said nothing, because there was nothing to say. He had given the order. These were the consequences. That was the transaction of command. He understood it, had always understood it. He finished walking the ridge, turned back to his horse, mounted, and rode back to continue the campaign. He never knew that the 11th body was his daughter. He never knew that the name he had circled on a roster 3 days earlier, with 1 wrong letter, was hers. He never knew that he had walked within 4 feet of her on that ridge, looked at her face, and not recognized her, because she was covered in frost, because the light was wrong, because the mind protects itself sometimes from what it cannot afford to know in the middle of a war. He won the battle, came home, grieved her absence in pieces, never connected it to the ridge, never connected it to the order, never connected it to the name he had circled without reading carefully enough. For 11 years, he carried her absence without understanding its shape, without knowing that the weight he felt every morning had a specific origin, a specific moment, a specific decision, made in a hurry, in the dark, by a man who was decisive, who was firm, who read names on a list, and forgot that names are people, until a child arrived at his gate, 8 years old, with her eyes, and his name, and the truth, that had been waiting 11 years, to finally arrive. His name was Jarl Osric. They called him Osric the Firm, not behind his back, to his face, because it wasn't an insult. It was a recognition. Firm in judgment, firm in command, firm in the belief that a leader who second guesses himself is a leader who gets people killed. He had ruled his settlement for 22 years when this story begins, had built it from a struggling outpost on a difficult stretch of coastline into something that other jarls took seriously, not through luck, not through inheritance, through decisions, hundreds of them, made consistently, made quickly, made with the kind of certainty that other men found either reassuring or terrifying, depending on which side of those decisions they stood on. His warriors trusted him, not because he was easy to follow, but because following him worked, because the settlements that went into difficult situations with Osric at the front tended to come out the other side. That was the reputation. That was what 30 years of firm decisions had built. His daughter was named Solveig. She was 23 when she died, and she was everything her father was, in all the ways he had never fully acknowledged. Decisive, clear-headed, capable of reading a situation faster than most people could describe it. She had his instincts, his ability to strip a problem to its core, his refusal to be overwhelmed by complexity. But she had her mother's warmth alongside it. Her mother had been the one person who could argue Osric to a standstill, who could make him laugh when he was being unreasonable, who could sit across from him in silence and somehow make the silence feel like conversation. She had died 7 years before this story begins. A sickness that came quickly and left quickly, and left Osric alone with a daughter who was 23, and running more of the settlement than most people realized. Solveig had taken over the administration almost seamlessly after her mother's death. Not because she was told to, because she saw what needed doing and did it. The way her father had always done things. The way she had learned. By watching him for 23 years. The call came in the 3rd week of autumn. An allied clan 3 days north was under siege. Their jarl had sent word requesting support. Osric had committed to the alliance 2 winters earlier. He didn't hesitate. He was moving within a day, taking 200 of his best warriors north, leaving the settlement in the hands of his second in command, a man named Broder. Capable, reliable, trusted. What Osric didn't know was that before he left, Solveig had spoken to Broder, had told him she was going, had made the argument calmly and completely. She had trained with warriors since she was 15, could handle herself in most situations, had been on 2 smaller campaigns before and acquitted herself well. The allied clan would need every capable fighter they could get, and she was capable. Broder had listened, had considered, had made his own firm decision. He said yes, added her name to the additional roster of volunteers, sent the paperwork north with a messenger, and assumed Osric would see it when the rosters arrived. Osric never saw it. The paperwork arrived during the first day of fighting, was handed to a junior officer who filed it with the other administrative documents, was never flagged as requiring Osric's personal attention, because it was a routine volunteer roster, and Osric didn't read routine volunteer rosters during active engagements. He read strategic reports, casualty assessments, enemy movement intelligence. The name Solveig, Osric's daughter, sat in a pile of administrative documents, 3 feet from where her father planned his campaign, and he never looked at it. The battle lasted 2 days. Brutal, close, the kind of fighting that doesn't feel like strategy while it's happening. Just bodies and noise, and the constant recalculation of what is still possible. On the 2nd night, Osric assessed the situation. The siege was breaking, but slowly. The enemy still had a functional supply line running through the eastern ridge. As long as that line held, they could sustain their position indefinitely. It needed to be cut. He needed a fast-moving flanking force. 30 fighters. Quick, quiet, willing to move into uncertain terrain without support. He pulled the roster, read through it quickly, picked 30 names. Fighters with the right combination of speed and experience. He read names, not people, names on a list. The way a commander reads such things when time is short and the decision is clear. He circled 30, handed the list to his officer, gave the order, and 30 warriors moved out into the dark. He didn't know that the 8th name on that list had been recorded with a single letter wrong. Solveig, Osric's daughter, written as Solva, Osric's daughter, by a tired junior officer during a chaotic administrative moment. 1 letter, 1 small transcription error, made in the kind of exhausted hurry that happens 100 times on every campaign. Usually it didn't matter. This time it meant that when Osric read the 8th name, he read a name he didn't recognize, assumed it was one of the volunteer additions, moved past it, and sent his daughter into the dark without knowing she was there. The eastern flanking force was ambushed before dawn, not because the plan was wrong. The plan was sound. It was ambushed because someone on the Allied side had passed information to the enemy. The flanking force walked into a position that had been prepared for them. 30 warriors went out. 19 came back. 11 didn't. Osric received the casualty list the following morning. He read it the way he always read such things. Carefully, grimly, accepting each name as the cost of what had been necessary. He stopped at the 8th name, Solva, Osric's daughter. Read it again. Didn't recognize it. Moved on. Finished the list. Folded it. And turned back to the campaign. Before we go further, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And subscribe if you haven't yet. These stories only get deeper from here. He won. The supply line was cut despite the ambush. The siege broke 2 days later. The allied clans survived. The alliance held. Osric returned home 11 days after he had left, with fewer warriors than he had departed with, as every campaign left something behind. He was told about Solveig in pieces, over days, over weeks, not all at once, not in a way that connected clearly to anything, just fragments, that she had joined a campaign, that she had not returned with the others, that she was presumed dead. Nobody connected it to the flanking order. Nobody connected it to the casualty list, because the people who knew the full picture assumed Osric already knew, and Osric assumed Solveig was managing something elsewhere, the way she sometimes did. By the time he understood she was gone, the campaign was months behind him. The casualty records had been archived, and the one conversation that would have connected everything never happened. He grieved, privately, completely, with the specific totality of a man who has spent 30 years keeping his face still in public. He sat alone in his hall for 3 days, ate nothing, spoke to no one, then stood up on the 4th morning, and continued, because that was the only thing he knew how to do. He carried her absence for 11 years, not loudly, in the way men like Osric carry things, in the empty chair at the table, in the administrative reports that ran differently now, in the way he sometimes opened his mouth to call her name, and stopped, in the specific weight of a hall that used to feel full, and no longer did. He didn't talk about her. He didn't stop thinking about her. Those are different things. The boy arrived on a gray morning in late autumn, 11 years after the battle. He was 8 years old, traveling with a woman named Hilda, a warrior who had served on that campaign, who had been Solveig's closest companion in the months that followed, who had spent 8 years raising a boy who deserved to know where he came from, and who was dying now, slowly, from something in her chest that had been growing for 2 years. She had held on long enough to do this one thing. Osric opened the gate himself that morning. He had seen the travelers approaching from the watchtower. Something about the way they moved, something he couldn't name, had made him come down himself rather than sending a guard. He opened the gate, looked at the woman, then looked at the boy, and stopped, not visibly. Inside, everything stopped, because the boy had Solveig's eyes. Not similar, not reminiscent. Exactly, the precise shade of gray-blue that Solveig had inherited from her mother. The same angle, the same stillness in them, the same quality of looking at something and seeing it completely before deciding what to do about it. Osric had seen those eyes every day for 23 years. He would have known them anywhere. He let them in, brought them to his hall, sat across from Hilda, and listened. She told him everything, carefully, completely, in the specific way of someone who has rehearsed the words many times across many miles, and still isn't sure they're adequate. Solveig had survived the initial ambush, wounded in the shoulder and the side. Serious, but not fatal. She had been pulled from the ridge by Hilda and 2 others, had been carried to a farmstead 2 miles east, had recovered slowly over weeks, had discovered during that recovery that she was carrying a child. The child's father was a warrior from the allied clan, a good man, who had also died in the ambush. Solveig had made a decision. She would not return home until she understood what her life was going to be, until she had something stable to bring back. She had stayed north, had found a small community, had built something quiet and real, had given birth to a boy in the spring, had named him Osric, after his grandfather, had spent 2 years building a life, and then had died, not from the battle, from an infection that had never fully cleared, that had waited 2 years before it finished what the ambush had started. She had died on a morning in early spring, with the boy asleep beside her, and Hilda sitting at the foot of the bed. Her last words had been instructions. "Take him to my father. He needs to know where he comes from." Osric listened to all of it without moving. Then Hilda told him the last part, the part she had saved, the part she had carried longest. She told him about the flanking order, about which force Solveig had been assigned to, about the roster, about the wrong letter, about how close he had come to knowing. 11 years ago, when he had read the 8th name on the casualty list, and moved past it, because it wasn't a name he recognized. The hall was completely silent. The fire crackled. The boy sat still, watching the old man the way Solveig had always watched things. Completely. Before deciding, Osric sat with the information for a long time, not processing it. He had processed it already. The moment Hilda had said the words flanking order, everything had assembled itself instantly in his mind, the way it always did. The way 30 years of strategic thinking had trained him to connect information fast. He had understood in seconds what had happened, how it had happened, what his role in it was. He was sitting with something else, something that didn't have a name in the vocabulary of command. He looked at the boy. The boy looked back, calm, still, with those eyes.
What is your name, child?
Osric asked. His voice was steady, because his voice was always steady.
Osric.
Osric, the boy said. She named you after me, the old man said. The boy nodded. She said you were the most decisive man she ever knew. The old man said nothing for a long time after that. Then he said quietly, she was right. And then, that was the problem. He gave Hilda a room, the best one in the hall. She died 11 days later, peacefully, with the boy beside her, and Osric sitting in the chair by the door, the way he had once sat by Solveig's mother. He raised the boy for 8 years. He was not a warm grandfather. He didn't know how to be. He was the same man he had always been. Firm, quiet, carrying things without showing the weight. But he never missed a morning. Rose before the boy and had food ready. Never left for anything without a farewell. Taught him everything. Tracking, strategy, how to read a room, how to read a roster. That last one he taught with specific and particular care. Every name, he told the boy once. Every single one. Before you make any decision that touches any list of people, you read every name. You say it out loud. You make it real, because it is real. And if you forget that, even once, even in a hurry, even when the moment seems too urgent for that kind of attention, you will spend the rest of your life learning what it cost. The boy listened, the way Solveig had always listened, completely, before deciding. On the last morning of his life, Osric called the boy to him. The boy was 16. Solveig's eyes in a face that was starting to become its own thing. Tall, quiet, capable in ways that were becoming visible. Osric looked at him for a long time, then said the thing he had never said to anyone in 30 years of leadership. I was wrong. The boy waited. Not about the order, Osric continued. The order was sound. About what I thought it cost. I thought I knew the cost of every decision I made. I counted it carefully. Lives, positions, outcomes. I was meticulous. I was thorough. I was firm. He stopped. What I forgot was that every name on every list is somebody's daughter, somebody's reason, somebody's everything. And a leader who forgets that, even once, even in a hurry, is not decisive. He is simply careless, with other people's everything. The boy said nothing for a moment. Then he asked, did she know? Did she know you didn't know it was her? Osric looked at him. I don't know, he said. I hope so. Another silence. Then the boy said, she named me after you. I know, Osric said. So she didn't blame you. Osric looked at his grandson for a long time, then said quietly, no, but I do. Some men spend their whole lives being right, and discover at the end that being right was never the same as being careful. That decisiveness without attention, is just a faster way to cause damage. That every name on every list is somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's last mourning. And the leader who forgets that, even once, even in a hurry, is not firm. He is simply careless with other people's everything. What would you have done if you were Osric? Could you have lived with it? And if you were that boy, standing at the gate of an old man's hall, with your mother's eyes, what would you have wanted from him? Tell us in the comments. New stories every week. Subscribe to Beneath the Surface Stories, because it's never just about the battle. It's about what happens beneath the surface.